Hi, I'm Katie Wilson. You are watching A News. Here are your top stories. EU leaders gathered in Brussels for a two-day summit to discuss the support package for Ukraine. The European Union issues plans to strengthen Europe's defence by 2030. Israel resumes ground operations in Gaza. European leaders gathered in Brussels on Thursday for a two-day summit that centred on the support package for Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has told EU leaders that his country needs support to acquire more artillery shells. It comes as nearly all EU leaders signed off on renewed support for Ukraine. Only Hungary's Viktor Orban refused to sign. Stuart Smith has more from Brussels.
The programme is known as ReArm Europe, and Brussels wants to put tens of billions of euros towards that programme in order to help join up the EU defence industry to make it cheaper for EU member states to buy weapons and also to help Ukraine through that programme as well. President Zelensky says he's interested in joining that, and Ukraine would have the option, but crucially it wouldn't extend to other countries outside the European Union unless they have a specific security agreement. So it means the UK and the United States would not be part of that, because as well as boosting European security, this scheme is also meant to improve competition within the European Union to help bring in money that could then be used for this crucial defence. One of the other things that President Zelensky said he wanted was the support of the European Union for an immediate ceasefire on land, which it provided in the latest document from the EU Council leaders, but did not include Viktor Orban of Hungary's support. And this seems to be the way things are going here, that on the most controversial issues like Ukraine, it's going forward with 26 EU leaders in agreement, excluding Viktor Orban of Hungary. So that seems to be the status quo here in Brussels now. The other crucial part for Ukraine in all of this is it says, something to offer the European Union. It's able to, for example, provide its cutting-edge drone equipment and technology and the lessons it's learned to the EU defence industry. What it needs, it says, in return is more ammunition and more shells, which will only come if the EU manages to reasonably quickly ramp up production. Stuart Smith for A News, Brussels.
The UK is hosting a meeting with senior military leaders on Thursday to draw up plans for a proposed peacekeeping force in Ukraine, with more than 20 countries involved. Britain and France will lead what's being called the Coalition of the Willing. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer will attend the meeting to discuss plans on how it would work. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin has always said he wouldn't tolerate any NATO members' boots on the ground in Ukraine. The European Union plans to strengthen Europe's defence by 2030 and break away from its reliance on the US. A two-day summit in Brussels, starting on Thursday, will focus on bolstering the bloc's military readiness as a result of geopolitical uncertainties.
The European Commission has issued a plan to enhance the European Union's defence capabilities. It's hoping to bolster military readiness and reduce reliance on non-EU allies amid uncertainty over future US support for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It also aims to provide more military support to Ukraine and improve the efficiency of the EU's defence market. A white paper called Readiness 2030 and a financial package are at the heart of the proposals announced on Wednesday by the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
The era of the peace dividend is long gone. The security architecture that we relied on can no longer be taken for granted. The age of spheres of influence and power competition is well and truly back. Just take Russia. We already know its determination to deny other countries their right to choose their own path. And now Russia is on an irreversible path to creating a pure war economy. It has massively expanded its military-industrial production capacity. 40% of the federal budget is spent on defense. 9% of its GDP. And this investment fuels its war of aggression in Ukraine while preparing it for future confrontation with European democracies. And just as these threats increase, we see our oldest partner, the United States, move their focus to the Indo-Pacific.
Earlier this month, von der Leyen introduced an €800 billion plan to significantly boost defence spending across the bloc. 150 billion of that will help EU countries invest jointly in critical military assets. At the moment, 2/3 of their orders come from the United States. Under the scheme, 65% of the equipment costs will come from the EU, Norway or Ukraine suppliers instead. The 27 member states are also being encouraged to boost their security ties with NATO allies. Moscow has criticised the EU's rearmament plans, calling them an incitement to war. As EU leaders gather for a 2-day defence summit in Brussels on Thursday, the EU signals Europe's commitment to strengthening its military and securing the region amid tensions.
France is strengthening its military following the European Commission's proposal for an €800 million defence fund across Europe. President Emmanuel Macron plans to boost defence spending with a €450 million fund and modernise France's nuclear forces by 2035.
France is expanding its military capabilities as geopolitical tensions in Europe escalate. President Emmanuel Macron has unveiled a major defence initiative driven by concerns over Russia's actions and uncertainty about US security commitments in the region. To support this effort, the French government is launching a €450 million defence fund managed by BPI France to help stabilise its underfunded defence sector. Retail investors will be able to contribute through long-term savings products. Finance Minister Eric Lombard announced that France is also seeking €5 billion in public and private investments to strengthen its defence industry, which relies heavily on 4,000 small and mid-sized firms. Many of these companies face financial strain and rising demand, requiring an estimated €1 to €3 billion in additional capital in the coming years. Macron has set a long-term goal of increasing defence spending from 2% of GDP to 3 to 3.5%, positioning France at the forefront of European rearmament. However, financial constraints remain a significant challenge. As part of its military modernisation, France is upgrading key infrastructure, including Luxeuil Air Base, which will house Rafale jets equipped with nuclear missile technology by 2035. It becomes the country's 4th nuclear airbase. Macron has also confirmed plans to acquire more Rafale warplanes to enhance national defence.
The European Union has delayed its first countermeasures against the United States until mid-April, allowing extra weeks for negotiations on which US goods to hit. It comes in response to US President Donald Trump's tariffs on metals.
The European Union has postponed its first countermeasures against US metal tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump, delaying action until mid-April to allow for further negotiations and reassess targeted US goods. Initially, the European Commission planned to reintroduce 2018 tariffs on $4.9 billion worth of US products on April 1st, followed by additional duties on $19.5 billion of goods on April 13th. However, EU Trade Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič announced the decision to align both tariff rounds, enabling member states to review them simultaneously while providing extra time for talks with Washington.
And as you know very well, on the 12th of March, the US imposed 25% tariffs on 26 billion of euros of steel and aluminium exports from Europe. Just to put it into the perspective, this is approximately 5% of total EU exports to the United States of America. In the light of the recent announcement that the United States are planning to introduce additional tariffs on the 2nd of April, We are now considering to align the timing of the two sets of EU countermeasures so we can consult with the Member States on both lists simultaneously. And this would also give us extra time for negotiations with our American partners to try to find a mutually agreeable solution, which clearly would be preference for us.
First set of measures includes a 50% tariff on US bourbon, a move that prompted Trump to threaten a 200% tariff on EU wines and other alcoholic imports. Meanwhile, the US administration plans to introduce reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd, aiming to rebalance global trade.
At least 70 Palestinians have been killed and dozens more wounded on Thursday. It's after Israeli airstrikes resumed across Gaza and the Israeli military banned traffic on the main north-south road.
Israeli airstrikes hit homes across Gaza on Thursday, killing at least 70 Palestinians and injuring dozens more, according to local authorities. It comes as Israel says it's expanded its ground operation in the Strip, aiming to increase a buffer zone separating northern and southern Gaza, known as the Netzarim corridor. The missiles hit both areas, including the city of Khan Yunis.
At approximately 2:30 in the morning, the brutal airstrike on this house took place. 7 people were sleeping in it, safe and sound, according to what the Israeli army had classified as a safe area. This area was a displacement area some time ago. Of course, they were all martyred, as you know. We took them out in pieces.
At the European hospital, bodies wrapped in body bags were seen on the ground as mourners gathered to pay their respects. Medics confirmed the casualties, with the toll expected to rise.
Stop this war. Stop this extermination. This is an extermination of the entire Palestinian people. What is the fault of the children? These are children. What is their fault? For every child, you bring 100, and what is this? Shame on you. The entire square, not a stone or anything, remains. It is all destroyed. They left nothing in the whole area.
This attack follows Israel's resumption of airstrikes on Tuesday after a ceasefire which expired on March the 1st and a deadlock in negotiations between Hamas and Israel, with both sides blaming each other. This escalation marks the deadliest days of the conflict in recent months, with more than 510 Palestinians killed in just 3 days, half of whom were women and children, according to the local health ministry.
The IDF resumed intense airstrikes on Gaza on Tuesday and has now also resumed ground operations. Giles Gibson tells us more from Tel Aviv.
This is the third day in a row that Israel has pounded Gaza with heavy airstrikes after the collapse of the ceasefire deal on Tuesday. The IDF saying that it's also carrying out what it describes as a targeted ground operation, sending troops along the Netzarim corridor, effectively cutting off the north of Gaza from the south. There have been eyewitness reports of bulldozers moving along the main road in that area, and also eyewitnesses saying that Israeli troops fired on cars on that road. Now, Hamas has described the new ground offensive as a new and dangerous violation of the ceasefire agreement. And we've also had the first military response to these strikes from the group, Hamas claiming responsibility for firing rockets from inside Gaza towards Tel Aviv. Local residents here in Tel Aviv were also woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning local time by sirens, which also blared out across central Israel. The IDF saying that they shot down a missile that was fired from Yemen towards Israel, but that they shot it down before it actually crossed over into Israeli territory. The Houthi rebels in Yemen claiming responsibility for that, saying that the target of that missile was Ben Gurion International Airport just outside Tel Aviv. The militant group has said that they are going to intensify attacks on Israel in response to US strikes in Yemen, as well as the renewed Israeli military action in Gaza. Giles Gibson for A News in Tel Aviv.
In Yemen, a densely populated neighbourhood in Sana'a was left in ruins on Thursday. It's after US airstrikes targeted the Al Jarraf district, injuring 9 people, most of them women and children. That's according to the Houthi-run Health Ministry.
At least 9 people were injured in Yemen in the latest US airstrikes which hit the capital Sana'a. That's according to local authorities. It's latest in a wave of American strikes carried out in retaliation for attacks by the Iran-aligned group, the Houthis, on shipping in the Red Sea. Officials say most of those injured are women and children in the Al Jarraf district.
We were shocked by the sound of the explosions, and we never expected them to occur in this neighbourhood, as it is full of civilians and devoid of any military points or bases belonging to any group. We were surprised by the bombing of our house, and we fled in panic, women and children. There were injuries to 7 women and 2 children. They terrified the women. They are an enemy stripped of values, devoid of principles, devoid of humanity.
These crimes and this barbaric bombing of civilian establishments in these densely populated neighbourhoods, targeting peaceful citizens in their homes, came treacherously and without warning while they were having their iftar meal after a day of fasting. Just as they were completing their iftar, the residents of this neighbourhood were shocked by these American strikes that targeted these civilian sites.
The US began the current wave of missile strikes on what they say are Houthi targets in Yemen last Saturday. It's after the Houthis had carried out more than 100 attacks on ships in the Red Sea since the war between Israel and Hamas began in 2023.
4 Canadians were executed in China on drug-related charges earlier this year. According to Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly, all of them were dual citizens and their identities have been withheld. Laura Westbrook reports.
China's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning said on Thursday that China is a country that upholds the rule of law and it had acted in accordance with the law. She said that China had protected the legitimate rights of the parties concerned as well as the consular rights of the Canadian side. A spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Canada reportedly urged Ottawa to stop making irresponsible remarks. Now, China does not recognize dual citizenship and takes a tough stance on drug crimes, imposing the death penalty on crimes related to drugs, corruption, and espionage. However, it is rare for the death penalty to be carried out on foreigners. Canada's Foreign Minister Melanie Joly said she had been closely following the cases and had tried, along with former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, to stop the executions. In a statement to Canadian media, Global Affairs Canada spokeswoman Charlotte McLeod said that Canada had repeatedly called for clemency for these individuals at the senior-most levels and remained steadfast in its opposition to the use of the death penalty in all cases, everywhere. Now, while the number of executions are kept secret, human rights groups believe China has one of the highest execution rates in the world. Amnesty International said the executions of Canadian citizens by Chinese authorities should be a wake-up call for Canada. Now, relations between the two countries soured following the arrest in 2018 of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. China then arrested 2 Canadian nationals. All 3 were subsequently released in 2021. And then last July, there was this surprise visit to Beijing by Canada's Foreign Minister Melanie Joly, which was seen as a sign that relations were thawing. But China has imposed tariffs on Canadian products like agricultural products and food products. That was in retaliation for Canada imposing tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles, steel and aluminium. And analysts believe this is another sign that the relations between these two countries are souring again. Laura Westbrook for A News, Hong Kong.
Record greenhouse gas levels has helped bring temperatures to an all-time high in 2024, resulting in accelerating glacier and sea ice loss. Rising sea levels are edging the world closer to a key warming threshold. That's according to a new report from the United Nations Weather Agency. It says the world's glaciers are melting faster than ever recorded because of climate change.
Gases in the Earth's atmosphere that trap heat levels, called greenhouse gases, brought temperatures to an all-time high in 2024, accelerating glacier and sea ice loss, raising sea levels and edging the world closer to a key warming threshold. Annual average mean temperatures stood at 1.55 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels last year, surpassing the previous 2023 record by 0.1 degrees Celsius, the World Meteorological Organization said in its annual climate report. In 2024, there were exceptional losses in Norway, Sweden, Svalbard, and the tropical Andes. Furthermore, as a consequence of a warming ocean and also as a consequence of melt from land ice, the ocean sea level is rising. Ocean heat also reached its highest on record, and the rate of warming is accelerating, with rising ocean CO2 concentrations also driving up acidification levels. Glaciers and sea ice continued to melt rapidly, which in turn pushed sea levels to a new high. From 2015 to 2024, sea levels have risen by an average of 4.7 millimetres a year, compared to 2.1 millimetres from 1993 to 2002.
Finland has once again been named the happiest country in the world, according to the 2025 World Happiness Report. The United Nations annual study ranks countries based on factors such as social trust, income equality and access to healthcare. While Nordic nations continue to lead, the report also highlights a worrying trend: rising global stress and uncertainty.
Finland remains the world's happiest country for the 8th year in a row. That's according to the annual study by the Wellbeing Research Centre at the University of Oxford in the UK. The ranking is based on Gallup survey data, where people from 143 countries rate their quality of life on a scale from 0 to 10. This year focused on the theme of caring and sharing, found that sharing meals with others was strongly linked with healthy prosperity across all global regions. Experts say Finland's success is not just about economic wealth, but also how it's distributed. The report says the country's strong welfare system, universal healthcare, and social trust create a stable foundation for well-being.
They have lots of resources, GDP, and especially they share it very equally. So they trust each other, both others in the community around them, but also the institutions. And that turns out to be really, really important and a bit of a differentiator from other rich countries with long life expectancies.
Denmark came second, followed by Iceland and Sweden. At the other end of the scale, Afghanistan ranked last, reflecting deep economic hardship and ongoing conflict. Other countries rank well, despite having a lower GDP per capita.
It's a good thing to put a spotlight on places like Costa Rica and Mexico. They have a very strong family set of family ties, so their immediate community is very strong.
While some nations thrive, the report also points to growing global stress and anxiety. Political instability, economic uncertainty, and conflicts are pushing negative emotions to record levels.
The larger political turbulence, shall we say, these days does very much play a role. And we pick this up in the negative emotions around anxiety, worry, stress. For example, around the world, the degree that people worry has increased extraordinarily.
In places like Gaza, where daily survival is the priority, happiness rankings feel distant. Ongoing conflicts and humanitarian crises highlight the stark divide between the world's happiest and most vulnerable populations.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.